Good morning and welcome. This is Rusty Ortiz with Gresco. If someone can just throw a quick chat response that you can hear my audio, appreciate that. All right, sounds like audio is working. Thanks everybody. Well, welcome to the webinar this morning. I have to say thank you all for taking the time and joining us here. And I want to say that really from the bottom of my heart. Yesterday we were just looking through the registration list of everybody that registered for the webinar, and it's for us to see the community come together around a topic and ideas like this, just to be able to share information. So thank you all for joining. We very much appreciate it. Let's see, for today we're going to be discussing the topic of integrating UAV technology into transmission line inspection and construction work. Some of the housekeeping items, everyone as you join should be muted, so I think all the audio should be muted. We will be recording this session, so if you know anybody that wasn't able to attend that wanted to, or if you need to reference back to any of the material that we go through today, then that recording will be sent out by email, a link to that, as well as a survey. As we are just starting to do webinars that are public facing like this to try to share information from around the community, I think, please give us a little forgiveness as we learn good best practices of doing this, and we hope to do more of it if it's valuable, and so we'd love your feedback. Give us all the good and the bad. So we'll be sending out that evaluation afterwards, questionnaire, and then also with that video link. For today, as you have questions, we will try to field all questions. We have an hour and 15 minutes blocked for this. I don't think the presentation portion will take nearly all of that, so we should have plenty of time to address questions. For questions, please type those into the chat box, and feel free to type those and send those out to everybody, to the whole group. I will jump in and we'll try to address some of those as we go, but we'll try to catch all the questions by the end. We'll have a block of time to answer questions then. Let's see, for today, of course, this is around the topic of drones and applications of drones. I think here at Gresco, our team, we are supply chain distribution. So we help get the right products to the right hands, and this has been an incredible journey for us over the last several years. I think we got involved late 2015 in this space, and our team, all the time we're pinching ourselves and saying, this is incredible that we get to be a part of such a revolutionary technology entering into this space, into the electric utility industry. And so we also see that that here at Gresco, we're in a unique position. We interface with all of the manufacturers that are making products for this space, and we also interface with all end users that are out there trying to put this technology to work. So in that, we end up talking to a lot of different people that had good information to share to the community. So we see this as a role that we can play to try to bring this together and try to facilitate and coordinate this information flow. So one of the things we want to do is kind of pull in some real world application, and Southern Company agreed to join us for this and bring their experiences to the table, what they've learned over the last, I think Southern Company's program's been going on for 5 years plus now, and it's been an incredible journey for them, and I think there's been a lot learned along the way, and all along the way, Southern Company's been so helpful to Gresco and to the entire community by sharing what they've learned. They've been very open with the lessons learned that they've come across. So very much appreciate them joining us for this. Today, the speaker from Georgia Power is Travis Watts. So I'll give a little introduction to Travis, and then I'll be passing it off to Travis for a lot of the content for today. Travis is a transmission line specialist with Georgia Power, which is one of the Southern Company operating companies. He has 23 years of line experience, and his current job duties are in the transmission group. He does transmission line evaluations. He's an analyst for both X-rays and thermal imaging. And then as part of his responsibilities, any kind of transmission line construction or maintenance projects, he will do final inspections on those. Just a little while back, Travis started a UAS drone working group within Georgia Power's transmission division, and it currently has 22 active operators, and they have 17 more that are in training. And this group handles all drone operations that cover comprehensive aerial inspections, line patrols, transmission line evaluations. They do data set collection and thermal imaging. So they do quite a bit within the transmission group. And so with that, I'll hand it off to Travis and let him take us from here.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me today. And thank you to Gresco for all they do and supporting us and helping us with our UAV program here at Southern Company. Today, I'm just going to go over basically the integration of UAV technology into the transmission line, inspection, maintenance, and construction program that we have here, specifically at Georgia Power, but it's kind of Southern Company wide too across our all of our operating companies. They do a little bit of different things, Alabama Power may function a little different and Mississippi Power may function a little different, but for the most part, our UAS programs run the same way, and Southern Company System Air heads those programs up. So first I'll go over just kind of a brief overview of the Southern Company. We operate 7 regulated utilities serving 9 million. We serve 4.6 million electrical customers, 120,000 square miles in the southeastern U.S., 46,000 megawatts, 27,000 miles of transmission line, and we're 3 investor-owned utility companies integrated into Southern Company: Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi Power. Here's just an image of kind of our area of operation in the U.S. And like Rusty said, Southern Company got into the UAS game, back in the beginning when there were Chapter 333 exemption. 2015 allowed us to, do testing and kind of get our feet wet in UAS. And then since the FAA passed the Part 107 certification, we've kind of dove in and started getting our pilots and operators trained and certified to get out there and put UAS to work on our system to help us not only be a safer point of view to access structures and get images and collect data that we want to collect, but also to help us financially use it to save dollars. As you all know, using UAS can save you a lot of dollars. Currently, we have over 100 internal pilots. Now that's Southern Company wide, not just Georgia Power, and 122 aircraft. That's probably gone up some. This presentation is about 6 months old when I put it together. If some of you were at the EPRI conference back at the end of last year, you probably saw some of the same information. Additional training required for internal pilots. So on top of what the FAA requires you to have, Southern Company actually has our own set of requirements. Once you pass all of the FAA's requirements, then we have our own set of standards and training requirements that you must complete before you're allowed to operate unmanned aircraft systems on any of our facilities, whether it be transmission, distribution, substation, economic development, anything that we've got going on in Southern Company. You have to go through System Air's training program to be considered a Southern Company UAS pilot. And our aircraft, mainly flying DJI products, ranging from the Spark all the way to the M600. There is a few other types of aircraft that System Air uses that are kind of out of the norm, but typically most of our operators are operating DJI equipment. The Southern Company UAS program was established within Southern Company System Air Organization. Now, System Air not only handles our UAS operations in Southern Company, but they also handle all of our other manned aircraft, helicopter, fixed wing type operations for Southern Company. And we have a program manager that manages the UAS side of the System Air organization, and then inside of that organization, they have 2 full-time pilots that work. And some of y'all may have met them at different conferences. Dean Barfield is the manager over UAS System Air. Corey Hitchcock and Dan Humphreys are the 2 full-time pilots for System Air. And their responsibilities, they are basically liaisons between the FAA and Southern Company and our affiliates. Internal UAS policies, general operating manual, they create those policies and update them and keep everything up to date on our operating manuals and guidelines. They do the instructor-led trainings, the e-learning training programs for our pilots. They make sure our UAS pilots are current and they are completing their currency and keeping all their training records organized and in order in case the FAA requests to see those records. They do research and test different aircraft to get aircraft approved to use on the system. They track and handle compliance assurances for not only aircraft, but also for the pilots and operators, and providing the pilots and the aircraft for specialized missions. So if we have something special that we don't feel like our typical, what we call self-dispatch, which is our pilots are just out in the fields that have other jobs, if we have a special mission that we feel may be a little bit outside of their ballpark, we'll bring in System Air to help kind of head that mission up and run through that operation to make sure everything goes safely and smoothly. Now I'm going to kind of move into Georgia Power and what we specifically are doing in Georgia Power transmission. That's my kind of area of expertise. I handle, like Rusty said, line evaluations, thermal, X-ray, imaging, patrols, those types of things that we're doing in transmission, specific to transmission. And most of this information I'm going to share is transmission lines in particular, because that's probably the biggest area where we're getting the most bang for our buck from UAS. So we started kind of the beginning of last year, started a UAS transmission working group. And what kind of kicked that off initially was most of the pilots and that have been in the program kind of since it started, we started to see an increase in the pilots across the system. And because, we cover a pretty big area, we wanted to make sure that we were having good communication with everybody, that everybody had access to all the information, because UAS is so new and there's so many new things happening and things that you don't really know what you know until you get out there operating and you figure out, hey, this is a problem, or hey, this is a good thing to do. So we wanted to make sure we had a good open line of communication between all of our operators so we could share that. So we started the UAS working group, and that encompasses all of our pilots in transmission specifically. And basically what that does is it ensures consistency across those operators, because we don't want one operator out there handling his checklist one way, and then a guy on the other side of the state maybe not even doing a checklist. So we want to make sure that, as the operators are out there and they're completing their checklist and they're evaluating their hazards, they're collecting and storing their images, that they're doing this stuff in a consistent way. That way, as we move forward in the future, we have kind of a solid foundation for our UAS program. And then another point is that it provides a platform for each pilot to share those close calls and best practices. We do have conference calls. Typically, we have 3 to 4 of them a year. We have added some as things come up. We have an issue, we'll jump on a call together and kind of discuss that issue. But the calls are very open. They're not going over a lot of real high level, futuristic type stuff. They're focused on, hey, what are we doing now in transmission with UAS that we have now? We're not really focused on like beyond line of sight or automated flights or AI type technology, stuff like that. We're focused on, hey, I'm flying an M210, I got a Z30 camera, I'm trying to collect these images, I'm having this problem. Those are the types of things that we're focusing on in our group. And the information that we're sharing, we are looking at the latest technologies that come out, and if they would benefit the group. Do we need those technologies, or are we okay with how we're functioning now? Right now we have 19 pilots that are part of the transmission working group, and we have 15 new pilots who are going through the process of getting their training to join the transmission working group. Those pilots are located across Georgia, and all of our pilots all have other full-time jobs. They're not specifically UAS pilots. They could be a lineman, they could be a specialist, they could be an engineer, and they use UAV as a tool to help them perform their job tasks. So it's something that they have on hand, they have the training, they have the knowledge, they have the expertise. And you could imagine, you have a lineman that's got 15 years of experience doing inspections, and he's been used to doing them from a bucket or with binoculars, and you give him a UAV, think of all the things he's going to find now. So, it's a really great tool that helps all of our job classifications just function more efficiently and safer too. It saves if you can hand that to a lineman, and he can check the top of a structure instead of putting on a climbing harness and having to climb that structure. I mean, that's a big safety benefit that our company sees, and helps efficiencies too. And they're performing work in basically all of our kind of job titles in transmission, whether it be maintenance, construction, or P&C field services, which is our test engineer group. We're getting a lot of bang from our buck from UAS. And then this year in transmission, I'm heading up an advanced operators group. Now, this advanced operators group will be responsible for the more advanced operations. So they'll actually be working in conjunction with System Air to do the more advanced operations, whether that be like thermal imaging, cloud point data set collection. I mean, just whatever you could think of that would require a little bit more expertise and a little bit more UAS knowledge to perform. Now, as you see in this slide, it says we have 8 Tier 2 advanced operators. All of our operators now are set up in a tiered system. So as you move into the UAS program, you start off as a Tier 3 pilot, which a Tier 3 pilot is what we call our self-dispatched pilot. They're flying aircraft that are 10 pounds or less. Typically, most of them start off with just say a Mavic, and that's kind of their base unit to get started. As they move deeper into the program and they start to build their currency and log hours, once they reach 20 hours of operation, then they're eligible to move into the Tier 2 operating group, which allows them to operate aircraft up to 20 pounds. So, and then to move into that classification, there comes some additional training that has to be performed to allow them to fly the more advanced, heavier type aircraft. So this advanced group that we're starting are 8 pilots that's already been through all this additional training. They actually have the more advanced aircraft and camera systems, and they'll be doing these advanced operations and working in conjunction with System Air to cover their TMA or transmission maintenance area. And we'll also kind of join up on team operations to handle more advanced operations statewide. This has just given us a kind of a better scope of where we can use the more advanced operations and where the self-dispatch pilot is good enough to handle what we need to do as far as UAS goes. So for example, let's say we have a 500 kV line that's 84 miles long, and we decide, okay, we want to do a comprehensive aerial inspection on this line. Typically in the past, we would have performed those with helicopters, and we still are using a lot of helicopters, manned aircraft, to do these types of inspections. But now we're looking at, well, if we could send a UAV team out there, one of these advanced operating group teams, And not only while they're doing the comprehensive aerial inspection, they can go ahead and collect a thermal imaging data set of all of our dead end bodies and high tension compressions, hot end insulator parts and insulators. They could also collect a 360 cloud point image data set of each structure. So if we wanted to, we could build a 3D model of the line. Why not send these guys out there and collect all this additional information, while we're doing these types of inspections, instead of just getting the typical CAI where a manned aircraft goes through and it gives you a list of the problems. Now with the UAS, you're able to collect such a large data set of images and just raw data that gives you so much more information on the line. And those types of things will help us too as we move forward in the future, with AI coming out and having those data sets of images, for AI to use as a reference point to function, once they get those systems up and running in the future. So this advanced group will be using mainly M210 aircraft series now. We do use some Inspire series aircraft, and then, they may even drop back to use the Mavic or the Skydio, the smaller aircraft, depending on, what the situation. But the point is they have access to all of the aircraft under 20 pounds to get the job done that they need to do. And then you can see here just the basic payloads that we're using. The Z30 camera is probably our favorite because you can get really close, and personal without getting the aircraft in an area where it becomes dangerous to fly. So we really like that camera system. And of course, the XT2 thermal imaging camera, which we just started using at the end of 2019. We really like those camera systems. And the operating type, like I said before, they're doing comprehensive aerial inspections, thermal imaging, cloud point data collection, line pulling, and just, we probably don't even completely know what all we're going to be doing with UAS. We're still learning. UAS is still so new right now. There's a lot of things that we can learn and just kind of, add to as we go. All right, so let's talk about line maintenance. How are we using UAS in line maintenance? Now, at each what we call TMC, Transmission Maintenance Center, they're responsible for the line maintenance in their particular area. So we're utilizing UAS in majority of the time in a self-dispatch type scenario where an engineer has a drone, a line operates, they go out, they find the problem. Or a crew's out doing an inspection and they come across something like this, a pin backed out on some hardware. Shot conductors, we're using them, get nice up close images of shot conductors. You can even see the bullet hole right there where it entered. So you can tell, okay, well, what type of repair do I need to make on this? It gives you, without bringing a bucket out there, getting a hotline tag, setting all that up. It saves you a lot of time. You can just fly the UAS up there, just a simple aerial notification, and you're ready to, go collect your images. This has been a big one, right-of-way access and conditions. UAS, I mean, as anybody who operates them know, it gives you an eye in the sky. So if you're out in an area and, say you just had a storm and you're unsure, you've had, tons of rain and high winds, and you can fly these things down the right-of-way and figure out, hey, can I enter this way? Is the right-of-way washed out like it is right here in this image? It really gives you good situational awareness, and that really helps you in your safety program. So you're not taking chances. You already know where you're going, and you got that eye in the sky to kind of give you that aerial overview. This has been a big use of UAS in transmission. Removal of bird nests from structures. We have down here on the coast in Georgia, we have a lot of ospreys. They build nests all over our structures. They love them. But you can only remove the nest if they're not active. Well, how do you tell if they're active? You can't see it from the ground. I mean, you might see, if they got some younglings in there, you might hear them chirping, or you might see one sticking out. But the way we used to tell, we used to climb the tower or set a bucket up and go up there and look. Well, now with a UAV, we can hover way above so we don't affect the birds, and get images, direct images. And we can even take those images, email them directly to our environmental department, and they can forward those on to the Department of Natural Resources to say, hey, look, we're going to remove this nest, it's not active, and then we're good to go. So they've been really beneficial in that aspect. Um, and then inspections, I know we all do inspections and we do different types of inspections. And UAS, as it grows and gets bigger, is just becoming more and more part of how we do inspections. And I think comprehensive aerial inspections, of course, is where a lot of bang for your buck from UAS, because you can just get images, like the one in this picture here. Um, even with a helicopter, you're kind of limited on angles and where you can get, but really with a UAS, I mean, sky's the limit. You can get in there and see pretty much whatever you want to see. You are limited sometimes by lighting, which way the sun's shining and shadows, and of course weather. But for the most part, you can get where you want to get and see what you want to see. Here's just an example of a few inspections that we did last year using UAS. A couple of 230 lines um, that we did down in southeast Georgia, Savannah, and then down around the Okefenokee Swamp. They can't. It was really beneficial because both of these lines, the right of ways were a mess. Um, it would have been tough to try to get crews in there. And then up in Savannah area on one of these lines, it kind of ran through a section where there's like neighborhoods on both sides of the right of way. So having the helicopter in there hovering, creating a lot of noise, you know, get a lot of complaints from customers. So UAV, we went through there and never heard one peep from anybody. I don't even think people knew we were out there. So, and then upcoming in 2020, we're looking at doing another CAI on a section of a 500 line. And on that one, like I said before, we're going to be doing the 360 cloud point, the AppSit cloud point, and then also a thermal imaging data set on that line. And then you got your outage investigations. You have your operations and you have your lockouts, and you're sending crews out or you're sending people out to patrol these. We've really started using UAS a lot to help us on these patrols, because you get a target area, from your control center. They say, hey, the line operated and it's within this set range of structures here. And when you go out there with a UAS and you start systematically inspecting each structure in that target area, you're going to come across, and I put this picture in here because it's a really good example of those flashed insulators. We actually had crews on the ground and they couldn't see this with binoculars. Just the way these insulators flash, that flash mark is really hard to see unless you're back at a distance with a really good spotting scope. But if you're right up under the tower looking kind of up, you can't even see this at all. And but with the UAS, nothing can hide from the UAS. It's going to find it. And then here's just another example of balloons got on the line, caused an operation. That probably could have been found with a ground patrol, but using a UAS just make things a lot simpler. And then you can imagine inspecting this. Okay, you need to inspect that structure on the other side of the river. You can either drive an hour around, or you can set up right here and fly across the river and look at it in 10 minutes with the UAS. So you can see how it can save you a lot of time in your investigations on your outages. Damage assessment, finding trees on lines. I mean, it comes in really handy. I think this was up in northern Georgia. This is kind of an island area. You can't even access this area unless you get on a boat and take a boat out there to this area. So they were able to set up on the other side of on the mainland and fly across and find this tree on the line. And then here's where we got a tornado in Georgia, and we just really used the UAV in this instance to just kind of get some images of the damage, just so that they could be forwarded on up to upper management so they could understand what type of damage that we had. That middle picture is a 500 kV structure, broke off at the waist. So you can see that they come in beneficial for all types of things for maintenance. You really think about it, you can use them for just about anything. Now, line construction, when we first started thinking about, hey, how are we going to use these things in line construction? We were really kind of stumped, but then we got to thinking about, well, on our final inspections, on these bigger projects on taller towers, like you can see here on these 500 kV insulator type replacements. Doing a final inspection, we're looking at every Carter key, every nut, every lock washer, every, making sure all the keys on the insulators are weathered. I mean, all the different things that we're looking at, and like that picture in the middle, you can't get that good of an image with a spot and scope or binoculars from the ground. You just can't. I mean, I've tried it. But with the UAS, you can get right up there and you can see everything that you need to see. And you can even get in, closer than that. If you saw an issue there, you could zoom in, get an even closer look. So they've come in really handy in final inspection type projects and making sure that we're double checking. Spacer damper replacements was another. We were looking at doing some spacer damper replacements, and we wanted to, kind of inspect some of our old ones and get some numbers off of them, and just get some general images. You can see, how you can even read the writing on the spacer damper. Those were taken with a Z30 camera. And there's just another example of that image of the hardware where, I mean, you can read the numbers on the yoke plate. So, you're just not gonna get that look with binoculars or even a spot and scope. And then one of the things that kind of System Air, Corey Hitchcock, he kind of headed this up, was the line pulling. We started having some requests to, hey, we need to get a line across this gorge or across this swamp. And so we started saying, well, we could shoot it across there with our little rope string guns, and when you fire it, who knows where it goes. You just have to go dig it out of the woods and then try to fish it across. Or you could take a UAV and literally fly it from one guy in a bucket on one side of the gorge across and just hand it right to the other guy on the other side, and then they can pull their bigger ropes back. So we've really started doing a lot of that on our construction projects. Swamps, marshes, and not only is it helping the crews and making the jobs easier for them, but it's also helping the environment. We're not having to take equipment through marshes or across ponds or rivers or, damaging, wildlife and vegetation. So it's helping us a lot in all those different aspects. And you can see here, this is just a list from last year, the number of spans we pulled and the footage of line that we pulled on different construction projects. This is a little video we were doing a 230 reconduct, and this is down in Southeast Georgia. And this video is a little slow. There's no cool music. Sorry about that. But this video gives you, I'll go ahead and start it while I'm talking. Kind of gives you an idea of how you can use the UAS to help you get across these areas. Now, you don't necessarily have to pull the string and lay it in blocks. And, when people start talking about pulling rope, they're like, oh, well, can you lay it in blocks like a helicopter, and all this different things? Right now, probably not. I mean, on a smaller scale, maybe, but on a 230 job where the spans are 1,400 feet long, the UAS that we have access to, you're just not going to do that. But in this instance here, we had a 800-foot wide section of marsh with a river in the middle of it, and we just basically needed to get some ropes across so that we could, pull our bull lines back across this river. So as you'll see, the drone will come forward and then it'll rotate around. We're actually using an M210 to pull the line that has a hook type release system on the bottom of it, and then the Mavic is shooting the video. One of my tier 2 operators, Charlie Thomas, he's shooting the video. It's a little shaky on the video, but pretty good video. So as you'll be able to see here in a second, the string is hooked to the drone there, and then we just fly it right on across without damaging any of the environment or having to, the way they would have done that before is they would have took a marsh master and just went through that marsh, pulling their ropes. And because we weren't exactly sure and we knew we were going to kind of be dragging it through the grass a little bit, we actually walked out on this dock here. And so we just flew it to the guys over here on the dock instead of trying to take it all the way across, because there was a little bit of current in that river, and we didn't want the rope getting down in the current and then it to start, kind of pulling the drone. So we just took it to the guys over here on the dock and just dropped it off with them. And actually, when we come down, I don't know if you'll be able to see or not, but that's where I'm standing and operating, on the end of that dock. So this is a great use of UAS. Saves a lot of time, a lot of money, saves the environment as well. pass it right off and go get the next line. All right, so now we'll move into substation and substation uses. The main use we've been using UAS for in substation is mapping mobile installations. We're installing these mobile transformers. They have to be installed, every so often. And a lot of times the data from the last time they were installed, where we put the switcher, where we put the mobile, how did we get it in here, how did we build the temporary line, to connect it all. Some of that information had gotten lost. And so now when they're doing some of these installations, they're using drone deploy, and they're going out with a UAS pilot, and they're flying these substations with these mobile installations, and they're mapping it, and they're mapping where everything's at. And they're storing that information on our shared drive, so that when it comes time to reinstall the mobile to do regular maintenance, they'll know exactly where everything goes. There won't be any guesswork. It'll save a lot of time. It'll save field visits of going out there trying to figure out. They can just pull the information up, look at the images, look at the mapping, and go to work. Send it to the crews and say, here's where we want everything. That gives you a good aerial overview of everything that is going on in those substations. And also, while substation construction is going on, getting images of the progress and how things are going, how things are laid out in the station with the new installations of the treadways and all the different things that they're doing inside substations. And then switch inspections, of course, you're got to inspect your switches. You got to make sure they're not heating up. You got to make sure all the parts are working, especially on a lot of these older type switches, like in this image here. So with the UAV, you can get up, you can get views that you typically can't get even from a bucket truck. The guys have been using these to do this kind of work inside substations on their switches. There's another image of a switch from up top. And then, on to thermal imaging. I kind of put thermal imaging in the sub side because for us, that had been kind of the main use of thermal imaging was on the substation side. And it still is a big use in our substations, but we are starting to branch out more and now do more thermal imaging out on our lines and looking for, jumpers pads heating up, or, high tension sleeves that, may not have been made correctly in the past that could be heating up. Insulators that are failing that could be heating up. So we're starting to branch out our thermal imaging program more into lines, and still of course using it in our substations to look at our switches and our bus work and our transformers and everything else that the substation guys are using it for in there. And then this is an example of kind of thinking outside the box and how to use UAS in other things that we do. I'm not going to read through this whole thing. I'm just going to kind of summarize it. But basically what they had was they had a breaker that had an FS6 low gas. All the gas leaked out of the breaker, and it caused the breaker to trip. And the fault data was pointing, in close that something happened, right at the substation, high amperage fault. And so when the TMC representative showed up on site, in this particular case, this was kind of before UAS, they would use binoculars to look at, and I'm gonna go ahead and flip to the next slide, to look at these gauges on the FF6, on the breaker, check the FF6 level of gas. But the problem is that some of these breakers, the way they're turned and the way, things are in the substation, you may not be able to see these gauges from a safe distance with binoculars. So they've decided that now if they have this failure or this alarm, that they'll dispatch a UAS operator to the location to use a UAS to go into the area that may be unsafe, to look at the gauge, take an image of it, verify, what they got before they actually send people in to do any kind of investigation. So it's another one of those UAS helping efficiencies, helping safety ideas, just kind of thinking outside the box of a way to use UAS. And that's really kind of a good overview of how we're using UAS in Georgia Power Transmission. And there are a lot of uses out there that, like I said, we probably haven't thought of yet, and a lot of things that, you know, we're still trying and experimenting with, but these are kind of basically boots on the ground, what we're doing now with UAS. Anybody got any questions about any of that?
Yeah. Hey, Travis.
Hey,
Man, thank you so much for going through and sharing all that. And we did have one question come in, and if anyone else has any questions you'd like to send to Travis, just send them in the chat box. But the one we had came in from Dustin. He said, on that line pull that you're doing with the M210, what type of release were you using and what type of line were you using?
The release system was, we started out trying to get a servo activated release system. And so I'm trying to remember the name of that company. Alan, are you on? Do you remember the name of the company that we those Sky Blue or Blue Sky? Blue Sky Release Systems is the release systems that we ordered. So when we put in and not trying to bash guys, because you know this can be a difficult thing to make operate with a drone, but we had some issues. It just wasn't operating effectively every time. You know, it would do it sometimes, and sometimes it wouldn't, and I didn't feel comfortable flying with that. So we used their bracket that comes with the kit. But then I wound up making my own manual hook release. And basically, when I say manual hook release, is as long as the aircraft is forward and moving forward, it pulls the line. The line pulls, you know, behind the drone, so it's holding it from pressure. But if you get in trouble, you spin the drone and back up, and it falls off. So that works every time. So that's what I feel the most comfortable with. And that's what we're using right now. Now we are doing some line pulling with the M600, and Corey has kind of created some of his own release systems that he uses, but those are all kind of internal that he's used and he's created. It's nothing I don't think you can buy from aftermarket.
And Travis, the line that you were pulling, can you describe what the line was itself?
Yep, the line is just regular what we call P line, 1/4-inch nylon rope. Way, you know, you can pull about, with the M210, you can pull about 800 to 900 feet of that with it. Now we do use some when we want to make longer pulls, we use some what they call jet line, which you can go buy at Home Depot or Lowe's. It comes in a bucket like 6,000 feet, super lightweight, and it's like, I think it's 600-pound tensile strength. So anything over 900 feet, we'll use that jet line to pull, just because of how light it is. The only thing I will say with the jet line is if you got a lot of wind and you have adjacent lines, that will tend to blow out with the wind, and that's why we like to use the nylon P line, because it gives you a little more weight and it's a little more manageable, and plus too, it's a 1,500-pound tensile strength. So when you get ready to pull your bigger ropes back, you can just hook it directly to your bigger ropes. Now there is some options out there for Dyneema type line that is really small, really lightweight. It's a little more expensive, but I want to say it's got like a 1,500-pound tensile strength. I want to say you guys carry it at Gresco, if I'm correct on that. That's
kind of the Vectran based material.
Yeah, I haven't used it yet.
Yep,
Myself,
right.
personally, I think Corey's used it some, but yeah, that's supposed to be pretty good.
See, there was another question came in about just comparing the pulling capabilities for line pulls between the M210 and the M600. I know you've personally done it with the M210, but have you had any experience around when System Air is pulling with the M600, or any comparison that you've heard from them of the two aircraft?
Yeah. I mean, I've done multiple operations in conjunction with System Air with the M600, and yeah, you get a lot better pulling capacity out of the M600. Typically, we don't pull any more than about 900 feet of the P line, the nylon line, with the M210, and we pull about somewhere around 1,500 to 1,800 feet of the jet line with the M210. Now with the M600, you can pull almost 2,000 feet of the P line, and then you can pull up to probably 4,000, maybe 5,000 feet with the jet line. So you get a lot more range with the M600, and a lot, I guess too, it handles the wind better, and once you start getting some blowout from the wind, you don't get as much pull to the side with the M600 as you do with the M210. So that's another thing you got to keep in mind is if you start pulling line with these things, is be very cautious at first because um, there's a lot of factors going on when you're pulling line. I mean, you're adding weight to the UAV that it's really not designed to handle. So the handling capabilities of the drone are going to change a lot, and it's going to change a lot every foot you go out. As you start to get more and more weight on that drone, you're not going to be able to raise up as quick, or you're not going to be able to turn as fast. Everything's going to start to slow down, and it'll get to a point where you'll say, okay, I don't feel comfortable. That's it. That's I got to drop it right there, and just make sure that if you are using it to pull, that you do have some type of release system, and you want to make sure that release system, and that's why I kind of harp on the manual, what I call the manual release system, is because I'm not depending on a servo that's going to fail. I'm depending on the aircraft's controls. If the aircraft control fails, what can you do? There's nothing really you can do. So your aircraft controls are your most dependable controls. So if you can set up your release system that uses that manual release where all you have to do is turn your aircraft and move backwards, it's going to work every time as long as your aircraft control works. Whereas that servo type release, I'm a little hesitant with it because you hit it one time and it opens, you hit it the next time and it doesn't. So be cautious in that regard.
Great, thanks, Travis. See, another question came in about geofencing issues, and the question is, how often do you run into issues where you have to get the geofence unlocked? And then do you see that as being an issue moving forward?
Yeah, we have had some issues with that, but I tell you, it really hasn't been that big of a deal. We've had a couple times where, matter of fact, we were doing an operation at one of our nuclear facilities, and of course they had the geofence there. We were able to make a call and get the code, and they had us unlocked within maybe 15, 20 minutes. So it wasn't really that big of a deal. I could see it becoming a problem if you're trying to respond to trouble, or and you're trying to get out there and maybe do a patrol, and you're kind of in a time crunch and you need to access that area, and it winds up taking you an hour to get the access. So yeah, I do see some issues with it, but on most typical UAS type operations, especially advanced type operations, they're planned. We know we're going to be out there. We already know in advance that we're going to be operating in that area. We know there's a geofence there, so we we go ahead and make preparations to add that additional time to get those unlocked. So it really hasn't been that big of a deal, and I haven't noticed. Most of the areas I operate in are really rural, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. I haven't noticed a whole lot of problems with areas being blocked off, so it hasn't been that big of a problem for us initially.
Great, thank you for that. Let's see, another question is, and I'm not sure, you may be able to speak to this, but this is more on the policies and the documentation internally. But do you know, as far as Southern Company, have you guys coordinated with other utilities or other companies as you generated those policies and best practice documents? Do you have any?
Again, I'm more of a field guy. System Air kind of handles that higher level kind of compliance and general operating guidelines and policies and things like that. But I'm pretty sure they have had some conversations with other utilities and tried to help them with their programs and give them some guidance. But as far as exactly how many and how much of that we've done, I'm really not privy to that information. I'm not sure, but I think that we're willing to share. As far as I know, we've been on. I've even been on a few calls with people, and just shared kind of general information. But as far as our getting down to the grits of everything, and all the little details of how we have every little thing set up. I'm not sure if they're allowed to share that information with everybody, but we do participate in EPRI, and we share information with them, which is sharing with the electrical industry. So, um, but yeah, we have done some sharing, but I'm not sure how much.
Yeah, and I don't know any of the specifics, but I do know that Southern Company's been a big voice in this fairly tight community, and as everybody's figuring it out, I know that they've been very open in speaking with other utilities through different industry groups that already exist, and sharing information through that. Let's see. Another question. There's a couple of requests that came in to see if you could show some any pictures of that release system, of how you set up that manual release. I don't know if you have anything available on your computer that you can show now, or if you can supply us with a photo, we can send that out when we send out the questionnaire.
I don't even think I've ever taken a picture of it, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure I can. I'll check with System Air and make sure because one thing I don't want to do is send out information and you guys go out and create your own release and then have an issue. So I would need to check with System Air to make sure that's okay to do. But if they say that's fine, I don't have a problem with taking a picture of it and sharing it with Rusty, and then he can get it out to the group.
Great, thank you. See, a question came in for software. What software do you use for flight management? And then especially since you have different drone platforms from different manufacturers.
Mm-hmm. Right now we're using Skyward to manage all of our flights and operations and keeping track of our pilot's currency. And Skyward's working through right now. They do support just DJI equipment. So and like I said, that is the majority of the UAS that we are operating is DJI. So it's worked really well. Then we are starting to use some of the Skydio drones, and as of right now, their data doesn't transfer into Skyward, so we're still kind of logging those operations, manually and keeping track of those flights. Basically what we're doing is there's ways to manually enter that information into Skyward, and so that's what we're doing now for the aircraft that aren't supported by Skyward, is just going in and manually adding those logs and hours now. But then everything with DJI, it automatically goes into Skyward and it tracks it and keeps track of everything for you. I guess, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that covers it. Thanks, Travis. And then there's a question here on what is the demand within Georgia Power Transmission for drone-mounted Corona cameras? And this question comes from someone that does flights for utilities in the southern U.S. And then they said that they've seen some demand, but not the level that you would expect. And so they're curious, how often is that a thing for Georgia Power?
Yeah, I mean, Corona scanning, it is kind of a here and there type of operation. We do, of course, own Corona cameras. They're not drone mounted. And we do Corona scans, but it's not something that we're doing a whole lot of, to be honest with you. We're doing it kind of here and there on an as-need basis. It's not like we have a scheduled set up cycle for our transmission lines to be scanned, Corona scans. So we're doing it on kind of a case-by-case basis. So it is kind of spotty work. But we have looked into. We do have a research department which works with System Air, and they are looking into ways to do scans with UAS Corona scans.
Great. See, there's a question about, are there any standards that the utility industry as a whole is following regarding UAV technology? So are you familiar with any wider standards that are outside of Southern Company?
I mean, the only standards I would say would be just the FAA's standards and requirements, what they require you, to have and operate as far as, you know, like standards that utilities are getting together and coming up with and, trying to have consistency among utilities. I myself haven't heard of any of that happening. I'm not saying it's not, but I think it would probably be a good idea, to do some of that. But how do you make that happen? It's kind of a, you know, because each utility that even within Southern Company, each of our own operating utilities, in some regards, they kind of have their own ideas and own ways, that they want to do things, and so I could see it, being a struggle to get everybody to to come into agreement with, hey, this is how we're going to operate and this is how we're going to function. Um, because it could depend on your area and what are your needs. I mean, the needs of Georgia Power in Southeast Georgia could be greatly different from the needs of you know somebody in northern Montana in the middle of winter. so yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard of any of that happening right offhand, but like I said, I'm not sure that it's not.
I know that there are different working groups within some of the industry associations that are within electrical utility industry that have been working on that and just trying to put together proposed standards. So I know that there is work going in, across the industry in that area. And then if anybody's unfamiliar with it, there was it was a big help early on. Oak Ridge National Labs tried to collect just by going around and polling all the electric utility industries that had any involvement in drones, and they put together kind of a compilation white paper, things to consider, that has been very helpful. So it was like a first, first early on effort. I think it's 2 to 3 years old now, so a lot of lessons learned have happened in the meantime. But I know that there are industry groups actively working on creating standards on different types of operations. But I don't think these aren't held by any large standards bodies that would have any kind of a, as far as I know, there's not any kind of large standards bodies with anything in place at this point. A question came in on that Nevada Energy doesn't allow DJI products because of questions on security. So just a question on, has that been discussed internally?
As far as DJI and security with DJI, is that what the question is?
That's how I understand the question.
Yeah, I mean, we've of course we've had a lot of talks and a lot of conference calls, and System Air has done a lot, with DJI and talking about security and making sure that that the data that we're collecting is kept secure. We really haven't had a whole lot of issues with data security, but at the same time, most of the things that we're, especially in transmission lines, that unless we're around a nuclear facility or a generating facility, I mean, most of the data that we're collecting isn't anything that you could go on Google Earth and zoom in on the transmission right away. And, I mean, yeah, you can't get up close images of hardware, but, you could get a picture of the structure and where it's at. So a lot of that stuff, I mean, not to say that it's not secure, but people really already have access to it for the most part. As far as transmission lines go, it's not like we can black out our transmission line right of ways on Google Earth. I mean, they're there for anybody to view. So in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, that type of information, if you got guys out flying, doing inspections on transmission lines, to me, it's not that big of a deal. But at the same time, and two, you think about it, if you take a picture of a flashed insulator and it's zoomed in, I mean, yeah, they can pull the GPS data from the image and tell you where that picture was taken, but you can't even, unless you took that image, you don't know if it was on this phase or that phase or this side of the structure. Yeah, I mean, some of that is kind of, to me, is being overthought a little bit. But now I do understand, when you're around a nuclear facility and you have those types of concerns, then yes, those. Now what we do around nuclear facilities is we keep everything in an offline type mode. Nothing's being transmitted out. All the images are viewed by a representative from the facility before we leave with any of those images. And if anything is of any concern, then that a lot of times they're deleted. So that's kind of how we're handling security right now. But yeah, I know there's some issues with it, and certain people are trying to work through that. But that's really not something I get too much involved with. System Air kind of handles those concerns.
Yeah, and I'd say on that question, there's been, we work with a lot of different utilities, and we've seen a lot of different approaches to the question on data security. So it seems like something each utility has been evaluating on their own, and the ones that continue to operate put in, standards and best practices so that the data, is secure. So that seems to be a typical approach, is to put in standards of how the data is collected and what kind of connectivity the equipment has to the internet.
Exactly.
Let's see. A question came in. What improvements do you see happening in the future of UAV technologies, or how do you see the technology evolving?
Yeah, I mean, since I've gotten involved, I think when I first started out, I was flying a Phantom, and so now I'm flying an M210 V2 with dual camera system, C30 and XT2 thermal imaging camera. So I would say the technology has advanced a lot from when I first started, operating UAS, and I think that they're just going to continue, just like anything. I mean, just like your iPhones or anything, they're just going to keep thinking of ways to make things better. And I know I've done one little thing at Gresco where they brought in some DJI engineers and we sat down and kind of talked about, hey, these are things we like, these are things we don't like. And I know Corey and Dean from System Air, they've had a lot of those conversations with DJI and other manufacturers. So I think, as drone companies start to see that the utility industry is a big customer for them, and it could be an even larger customer than maybe they think, that they may start to, look more toward modifying their equipment or creating new equipment that really meets all the needs that we want. And but right now, I think the thing is we don't really know exactly what we want. We're still kind of so new that it's a trial and error, and until we get a few more years under our belt and kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work, and what things we would really need and what would really help us. Because I've had conversations with people, and you start thinking about things, and it's like, I'd really like to have this, or I'd really like for it to do this and do this and do this, but then you get thinking about it, you're out there operating, you're like, I don't really need that. How often would I really use that? So I think it's identifying those things that are really truly a need, and then getting the manufacturers to kind of meet those requests. I mean, I think that's where we're going to get the most bang for our buck from these manufacturers, when we're able to get that kind of information in their hands, and then they start producing those types of equipment.
Yeah, and I say, Travis, that seems very common. What we've realized just on the Gresco side of interfacing with utilities as well along this journey is there's learning in every direction. So there's a lot of learning to do with something that is this new. And so, yeah, it's definitely from the field operations and seeing what really works and doesn't work, but then on the equipment side, on the policy side, on the on all fronts, the data side, there's a lot of learning on all fronts. See, another question came in. It says, do you have two pilots per each drone that's flying, or how do you do the pilot to the aircraft arrangements for transmission work?
No, the way we have it set up is we have a radius. So if you're out there, say you're a lone worker and you have a UAS, we allow that lone worker to fly 1,200 feet away from his control station. And if he's going to go beyond 1,200 feet, then yes, he's required to have a VO. Then you require a two-person operation. So as long as you're within that 1,200 feet and and you're and you feel comfortable, you've done a FRAD, a flight risk assessment, and you don't move into what's considered a high risk type operation, then yes, you can operate solo on your own out there. But just for example, say I was flying inside of a restricted airspace. I had gotten a Lance authorization. I knew I was a mile from the airport. I knew that the flight pattern, I was going to be, you know, in close proximity to the final on the flight pattern. Our pilots, have to know that they have to make the decision there that that's a high risk operation, and it requires two pilots. So we do have some guidelines and some things set up that, depending on the circumstances, would require a 2-man operation, or even a 3-man operation. Because if you're operating, so say you're operating an M210 in that scenario with dual camera systems, say 2 of our tier 2 operators. If we're operating dual camera systems on an M210, we're going to have 2 operators. We're going to have a RPIC, and then we're going to have a SO. And then if we're in that increased area where there's increased FRAT, where you're a high risk area, then you're actually going to have a VO. So then you have to have a 3-man team. So depending upon the conditions and what's going on in the operation can dictate, how and how many people are part of your UAS team.
Great. See, I think we got another 9 minutes left, so we've got a few more questions. So we'll keep going. See, there was a question about some future future webinars, and a request for some thermal imaging, and then also to bring on System Air and have them speak to some of the programmatic pieces of what Southern Company's doing. So absolutely, thank you for that feedback, and we'll work to get that set up. Then here's a question on your operations, Travis. Is most of your work visual line of sight, are there a lot of waivers involved in the work that you do?
Yeah, most I'd say 90% of what we do is visual line of sight. We're able to accomplish what we want to accomplish for the most part in visual line of sight operation. And because a lot of what we're doing in transmission is comprehensive aerial type inspections, where we are really trying to get up close. We're trying to even rate rust, give it a rating. So when you're doing that, you're not going to do that from beyond line of sight. You're not gonna get down close enough to an overhead ground wire from where you don't have your somewhat situational awareness. I mean, we may be multiple spans where the aircraft is just kind of relatively a smaller dot in the sky, but at least you can still see where it is in reference to the structure. So when you're doing those comprehensive type inspections with the technology that's there now, and with the obstacle avoidance systems that are there now, you're not going to do that, in my opinion. Now, I'm not saying you may be a pilot that can do that, but in my opinion and with my experience, I'm not going to do that. Even if I had a beyond line of sight waiver, I wouldn't try to do that type of inspection outside of line of sight. Now, if you're just doing a patrol and you're just flying down the right of way looking for a tree on the line, then yeah, I could see where that could be beneficial. And we have done some of that. We have put in for some waivers to get some, some beyond line of sight, or extended beyond line of sight type of waivers, but we haven't been doing a lot of it, just to be honest with you.
Okay, great. And I think that addresses one of the future questions if you guys are pursuing beyond visual line of sight now or in the future. So it sounds like you guys are doing some extended line of sight waiver applications.
Yeah, and that's more in System Air's realm. They handle more of the beyond line of sight, the AI, the kind of futuristic stuff, stuff that's coming in the future. So they're working more on those types of things. Like I said, our group in transmission, we're kind of focused on what we have now, the rules that are outlined now, and how we can operate now, and you put UAS to work under the current rules that we have now. And and even under the current rules, I mean, the benefit of it is unbelievable. I mean, the benefits you get from the UAS, even having to maintain visual line of sight. So.
All right, great. Another question came in about training and what types of training do you see being useful. I think that this may be in context with another question that was also submitted. And Travis, this seems like it might be something better for system error to address, but it's something that you may have some interface with as far as when Southern Company brings on contractors to do drone work. Are there any kind of credentialing programs or certifications that are required, certain types of training that as you're vetting service providers? So I don't know, do you have any experience or exposure to that?
I mean, I've been out with some contractors that they brought on system, but they do have a vetting process, and of course they do, doing a pretty extensive check on those operators and those companies to make sure that, they are operating safely, just like we would do with, any manned aircraft that we would bring on system. I mean, they have to meet, all the requirements, and they have to have, safe operations. They have to have so many, hours logged, and different things like that. I'm not sure of the whole knock list of everything that they have to have. That would be something that System Air would deal with. But yes, they do have a vetting process, and they do have a kind of an approval process that they go through before they can come on and operate on our system.
Great. And yeah, I think that's a great idea to have System Air on to talk some more about the program and kind of the direction of the program. So so we'll work to get that set up and have a future webinar that's geared towards that. I think that is most of the questions. One on here about will we be offering any training on UAV for certification of UAVs? And so that is something we can definitely do. I know we at Gresco do training for preparing people to get certifications. Most of that's done as instructor-led in person on site, but that may be something worth looking at as far as putting it in a online-based format. So we'll take a look at that, and I think that rounds out the questions that we have so far. So if anybody has any further questions, please do reach out by email, send us an email, and we'll try to make sure all questions get answered. Our goal here, of course, is to try to bring this information, this knowledge, all these lessons learned amongst all of us together and share that. So when we send out the questionnaire, please take a moment to fill that out and give us some feedback. We want to get better at providing the right kind of content. So so we look forward to doing more of these. And Travis, man, thanks so much for joining and sharing with the group. I think this is very beneficial, and we appreciate you and Georgia Power and Southern Company for all you do for the community and for helping us all as we all learn this together.
Yep, no problem. Appreciate the opportunity to come on and share, and I hope all you guys are getting the most use out of your UAS, and just be safe out there and fly safe, and enjoy it. I mean, it's I was telling somebody when I first started doing line work, I never would have dreamed that I would have been flying UAVs. So
Yeah.
not only is it a great tool, but I mean it's a really cool tool as well. So so be safe with it and enjoy it, and be good stewards of it, and you'll get a lot of benefit out of it.
Great, awesome, thank you, and thanks everybody for joining. We'll close out now, and you'll hear more from us later. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.